I feel like this might be one of the episodes, Steph, that really highlights yours and my differences.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic, obviously, but I'm also curious as to what you have to say about it because I think I talk about it a lot. I talk like this is a theme I bring up a lot. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to hear other insights into it. But yes, I don't think everybody here knows what we're even talking about today.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So, for the benefit of our listeners at home or walking or wherever you are, we're joined today by some of the members from our podcast community who are listening in live.
They
That's
don't even
one,
know what
two.
they're in for
That's
because we
true.
just decided this topic, what, yesterday? We
Yes, we
came
did.
together on it.
Yeah.
It was actually a suggestion, though, from a YouTube listener.
Or maybe we could see if the community could guess based on, I'm saying we can give them clues like, we might have to cut some of this out because it might not be interesting for people at home. But I'm saying I think it's a topic that Steph would be much more comfortable with. Fair to say?
Mhm. What might we be talking about today?
Well, we got
Somatic. That
somatics
that
as a
was a
guess.
good guess.
That's yeah.
It's not though.
Um, no, it's more, it goes back further than that. I would say this is something that you've always it's part of everybody's emotional experience, but I don't even know how to word
Predominantly my emotional experience.
it. Yeah.
My favorite emotional experience.
Yeah. We could go into cultural stereotypes here and go, think Italian.
Yeah. I that actually comes up in my mind a lot about
Mhm.
like I wonder if there's like an epigenetic part of that.
Well, Eckhart Tolle would talk about it as the pain body, that certain cultures, based on like historical experience, have
Mhm.
certain emotional blueprints, if you like.
I buy into that. I'm actually so I'm not 100% Italian. I'm three quarters. My dad is 100%. My mom is 50-50. So my grandmother, my mom's mom is the only grandparent I have that is not Italian or that wasn't. They're all gone now, but and she was the one who had the least amount of this emotion. Like like she demonstrated that this emotion that we're talking about the least, whereas the others, yeah,
Yeah.
the
And
Italian crew,
that's an important point because we're talking about the demonstration of the emotion because
yeah,
everybody has it.
right,
But maybe some cultures it's more culturally acceptable to show it.
yeah. Okay,
We-
should we just tell people? We should
All the
get to
listeners at
it.
home are going, we know what this is. We've seen the
Yeah, that's
title.
right.
Today, today we're going to talk about anger.
Anger, yes. It was a suggestion on the YouTube channel,
Mhm.
coming off the heels of our episode on depression.
Can we do a free association thing then? If I
Sure.
say to you, anger is, what's the first word that comes into your head?
Energy.
It's interesting because if I were to do that in a reactive way, not in terms of what I think about it now as an adult who's reflected on it, but if I think about my much more instinctual response, first response, it goes along the lines of not nice
Oh,
or even not safe.
okay.
And have you seen this? I've seen this a lot in some of the literature around emotional eating and anger being one of the biggest ones that people use food to suppress. Have you seen that come up a lot? I've seen that a lot in like psychoanalytic literature, especially.
It feels like something I take as fact. Like so I've probably seen it and just internalized it. That feels right.
Hmm.
Not personally, but I know that that's an emotion just from working with people that feels like the one people are least comfortable with.
Yes.
Other
Yes.
adjectives we're getting here: red, anger is red, anger is physical, hitting out. What is hitting out?
Like violence, I
Oh,
assume.
like violence.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that I think is part of it as well, because anger often, I say often again, like this is my biases coming in. I think maybe quite commonly can be seen as like a form of attack.
I get that. And I've experienced it that way too. When I get angry, I get critical.
Hmm.
Um, I get aggressive, not physically, but like my words can be. And I feel like that. I feel aggressive. To me, that's why I say like energy, like I think there's so much energy in it that is why almost it makes sense to me that emotional eating, if we're trying to suppress that amount of energy, like it's got to have somewhere to go to in a way that to me feels like almost can't understand it. Like I'm like, how could one suppress it? Because it's so powerful. It's so loud. And I can't even imagine not being able, or like I don't even know how I would go about suppressing that one. I can suppress
What's
the
it?
others though.
What's it like for you to be on the receiving end of anger?
That's how I grew up. So when I'm on the receiving end, I get fiery. Like I could feel it right now. I'm like, don't. I get very defensive and I get very angry back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's actually why my anger comes up so much, because I think like whenever I feel anyone's attacking me in any way, or like something is not fair, or something is compromising me, I get angry. And I think that's because when I had anger towards, I had to get anger back if I was gonna like stand a chance. So I couldn't just fold. I did, I think, as a little kid and as a probably medium kid. And then I learned, no, like that's not getting me anywhere. And I got louder. And then I started to go back. And that has been my defense position since I would say I was like 13.
I guess I'm very conscious as well. Like if I were to show my anger, and even times when I have, being very, very, or like having a concern about how I'm going to make the other person feel, make them feel. Do you know what I mean? Like when you talk about how you feel, how comfortable is that for you to know you could be making someone else feel that? Because for me, I'm like, oh gosh, no, I don't want to make anyone else feel that.
My anger is reactive. So like I get angry back. I guess I conflate a little bit anger with empowerment. So when I think about having anger, it's really coming from a place of I'm defending myself. And that almost feels like a good thing because that is the way that I learned it first, right? Like so in my example that I just gave, like anger was my reaction to anger being towards me. So it was a way that I defended myself. I still feel that way. I still feel like when I get angry, it's me standing up for myself. So if I put it in your mind, the way you just described it feels to me more like that's a little more uncomfortable, because to me that's like, oh, that would be just mean. That's not the way I experience anger.
Yeah, interesting. There was a time, and I probably should have run this by you before I decided to do this here in front of the community. There's been one moment when I was furious with you.
I wonder if I
Do you
know
know?
what it is.
Oh no, this is what I thought. Go on.
I don't want to say in case
I know
it's the wrong one.
Go on.
Well, I don't want to say it in case it's the wrong one, because it's gonna be like, oh, what was that about? Was it just in May?
Yes.
Yes, I was too.
Yes. Yes.
I thought
Yeah,
about this the other day.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I was right back, and I felt okay. Go ahead, you go
Yeah.
first.
I think because I snapped at you. That's how I remember it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the story in my mind about what happened. We were putting on this event. I got kind of, well, not ironic, I guess, but it was happening at a podcast listener in-person event, the one we did in Bournemouth. And me and Steph arrived. And at an event like this, there's so much to do. There's so much to think about. We're trying to get the room set up. We're trying to make sure this is okay and that's okay. And as we're going in, we've got to get all the chairs out and everything. And I'm lugging the chairs in from the other room. And Steph's there, like, putting out all the snacks. That was the first flash of irritation. It's like, oh, I'm doing all the heavy lifting here. And Steph's just getting to do all the fun arranging stuff and making everything look nice.
No, just trying to do something productive.
Yeah, like I said, this is just like, this is the story that's going on in my mind. And I'm so aware now that like, this is the story that's kind of playing out in the moment and what it ties into, because my emotional response was not proportionate to the situation because it was triggering old stuff in me. And so in my mind, the story is, oh, I'm the one that has to do all the hard work and everyone else gets to do the fun stuff. Like that's the old stuff that's kind of playing out. And then I was still putting all the chairs out and stuff. And I think you were outside filming and stuff. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah. So you're outside admiring the view and stuff like that. And I'm here trying to put the chairs out. And the room was a really weird shape with these pillars and stuff. So you couldn't see. I just want to stop a second and just say, I noticed that telling you this, I'm getting really hot. Like I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Not because I feel back in touch with that anger, but I feel activated. And there's part of me going like, no, Sarah, like, don't talk about this. Like I feel unsafe is too strong a word, but there's part of me that's kind of going like, oh, like this feels a little scary to talk about this. So I just want to name what's going on for me in this moment. And then I remember going, Sarah, if you need help, just ask for help. So I remember saying, Steph, can you come and we need to figure out what to do with these chairs because we've got these posts in the way. And then the details get a bit hazy there, Steph. I just know that you were doing one thing, I was doing another thing. And I was like, we're both doing completely different things. And I think you said something, and I snapped something along the lines of going like, yeah, I know, that's why I asked you, or that's why I asked you to help, or something like that. And I remember that when I said it, my reaction is there was a little bit of a double take from you. In me, I was like, I just need to calm down. And then we never spoke of it again until now, the 25th of
Yeah.
July.
I thought about it the other day. I
Yeah.
have to name that I'm feeling reactive. So
Hmm.
like it's really hard for me to be quiet
Hmm.
actually and listen
Speak,
because
speak.
we're on a podcast. So I am. But my instinct, had this not taken place on a podcast, would have been to interrupt, which is what I do a lot, because there's a feeling of like, no, like, no, 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 that's not what happened. Or like, that wasn't my experience of it. And there's this feeling inside of me of being misunderstood. I think this is an anger trigger for me, being misperceived and feeling like, no, that is not what I experienced. And I need to defend again, my stuff. And I know that. But what happens is that I can tell you, like, I have a lot of energy going here and up in here, and I'm getting cloudy. So this is what happens to me when I get angry. And I have a very shallow breath. And that's so hard for me. Typically, this is like such a great therapeutic exercise because it's very difficult for me typically to stay out of my response. And I'm doing it now. I'm staying
You're
like
doing it. You're
here,
doing it.
but it's really hard. And so what that kind of unleash of energy would do, I can appreciate why that would feel to somebody like almost like there's an out of controlness to it, because it's like, whoa, if I let that up, I'm going to start letting that, like, there's going to be a lot behind it. And that I can appreciate. If I hadn't grown up in the environment where I grew up and I didn't get really comfortable with that happening, I can understand that as like, keep that down there. Typically, I let that go and I start to talk and talk and talk. And I almost feel like this is just a different experience because I'm just like not. And I'm like, oh, okay, like it's so interesting, even just watching you look at me, like you're actually giving me the space to talk, which is interesting because my instinct is that like you're going to bulldoze me and you're going to keep pushing your thoughts on me and I'm not going to get a chance. But I could completely understand why that would become a binge. You know what I mean? Like where that would be like almost like there's a violence to it, not a violence in terms of, but like the energy is violent. And so in terms of like a lot. So in order to put that down, literally to eat and stuff it down, because the gravity of like fullness in the stomach would be something to contest the way that this feels like this right now. You know, it doesn't actually at the moment so much, but like it did, you know, like this like, you know, like, and food would be like a salve, kind of like like it's a gravity that pulls it back down. To me, that makes a lot of sense why people talk about binging from anger, like, and why that would work. I just typically would yell. I don't know that it's productive to, unless like it feels relevant, to talk about my experience of that particular moment. I don't think it matters like what my interpretation was, because then it's just getting into the nitty gritty of the details. But we didn't address it, and we couldn't because we had to get on with it. Like people were arriving, you know what I mean? Like we didn't have time to talk about it, but it took me almost like 20 to 30 minutes inside into that workshop to calm down from that. I felt very like I wanted to block you out.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to feel warm again. So like, yeah, just to sort of name what this all can feel like. But like, I don't know. I don't feel like I've been harboring it, but it's just something that I think it's hard. I think that working through anger is really, really hard, especially where there's not communication. But even when there is, you know what I mean? Like it's a strong emotion and it can feel unwieldy. It's like the way I talk about pressure cooker kind of eating. Like there's a real skill involved that I can sense even now, like of like, how do I let some out without letting it all out? You know, like how do I mitigate the pressure here? It's a really difficult thing to do. I think with like sadness or a different kind of emotion, to me anyway, sadness feels like down here, and it's like there's not a mitigation. It's just like what's harder about sadness to me is just the experience of sadness from the point of view of like feel just like I don't want to feel this way. But anger feels almost like I don't want to feel this way and I don't know how to wrangle it. Like it's like an animal running away with it. So like, I don't know. It's like something outside of me almost.
Well, it's interesting when you said, I don't know whether it's helpful or whatever to get into the details. I was thinking it's helpful in as much as I've got to speak and say, this was the story that was running through my mind at the time. It's not a story that I have attached to afterwards because I can see how it was just like this buildup of pressure, triggered some old stuff, and then like this whole story kind of went boom. And I can see it for not being real. But do you feel like there's any benefit or need in you to have your story heard? Or does that not feel important to you at this moment? That's, I guess, what I think is the question when it comes to the details.
Yes, it does. But I also feel like nobody else wants to hear that. So like there's a certain amount of I don't want to take up space talking about that to people who are like, can you just talk about anger and how I relate to my food? This personal experience of it feels like I'm just taking up time.
Okay.
You know?
Well, that is all the more reason I think to do it.
For me, but not for people listening.
Yeah, but the people listening are hearing you and I having a process about a moment that is about this very emotion.
Okay.
And this whole like, okay, I'm going to shut my experience down to look after everyone else, I think is what a lot of people out there are doing. So this is, I think, helpful for people.
Well, people are saying in the chat that it would be, so I will. And I'm a little bit nervous too. So I'm going to name first that like if I feel I'm shaking, like if I feel and what's interesting is I feel also like almost under it, I can perceive tears behind my eyes. They're not here yet, but I can feel them.
Sorry, you just saying that is making me feel, I don't even know why, but yeah, I can feel it too.
Yeah. It's hard. It's so hard for me because I have so many thoughts and the energy comes up really fast. So I'm going to try to go slow. So I felt like we were like teaming up. Like I felt like it was like, okay, well, I took chairs out. What actually I remember happening, and this might be an inaccurate memory, but like I remember us both we both did rows, but I felt like you had a specific idea of the way you wanted the chairs arranged that I didn't have a perfectionism around. And I was kind of like, this is good enough. Like the chairs are out where they need to be. We also need to put out the snacks. And I also wanted to do a reel for Instagram about this because I felt like that would be helpful. So I was like, okay, you seem to have like a notion of how you want the chairs. And you were felt very like you were being very specific about like the eye line. And I was like, okay, it's an event. There's a lot of anxiety around events. Like let you work that out the way you need to while I do these other things, because that's more my wheelhouse. Like I don't care where the chairs are. That didn't matter to me. So I mean, laying out snacks just was like, all right, I'll do this because it needs to get done and no one else is here to do it. So I did that. And then I was like, I wanted to make that reel for Instagram for us. So I felt like we were in a situation where like you were doing the way we usually do, like you speak to your strengths and I speak to mine. It never would have occurred to me about like heavy lifting. Like that didn't feel that this is the first that even occurred to me. Cause I don't know. That just doesn't feel like I have no problem lifting chairs. Like that didn't occur to me. But then when you said to me, you said something like, no, like I was doing it wrong. Like the way I arranged the chairs wasn't good enough is what it felt like. And I thought it was, and you thought it wasn't. And so of course there's stories in that of like, I'm not doing it right for someone else, you know? And then it's kind of like, okay, then do it the way. So I think I said back to you, then do it the way you want. Or I said something snarky back. Like you said something to me and I said something back to you. That was part of my defense. And I felt like when you said that to me, I got mad and I was like, well then blah, you know? And to me that felt like, no, like it felt like a boundary of mine. But I also felt like completely misunderstood and like devastated inside around like what's happening here. So it was this both emotion. And I'm just now realizing that like when I experience anger, potentially there's also sadness. There's also like hurt. And I get in touch with the anger part because I feel this need to be like, no, don't talk to me like that. This is just as much yours as it is mine. And I feel really strongly about putting that boundary up, but then that's where I get stuck. And then I don't recognize that there's other stuff underneath it. I do know that there is, but I tend not to explore the other side, which is only just coming up now, which is more around the hurt. And I think that it gets confusing to me. And then I want to shut you out. And not you, like just you. Like I also feel like this about other, like I get very like, leave me alone, leave me alone. I'm not good enough. Okay, fine. Then you go do you and I'll do me. And then we don't have to worry about this. Like that's the avoidant in me too. And that's what came up as well. I think naming that feels good. But also I feel a little like vulnerable and isolated. Like I'm afraid to stop talking. So maybe that's why I don't.
Yeah. At any time when I would think about it, there's no part of me that outside of that moment is thinking, oh, Steph doesn't want to help me. Like, oh, Steph's trying to get away with not doing stuff. There's no part of me in my here and now, or even afterwards in my there and now self that believed that. But in the moment, that was the belief, like genuinely. It was this sense of like, no one. And again, like this is, you said that whole feeling like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. And for me, it's like, oh, you're not helping me. Well, I guess, yeah, it was an anger. And I remember, because I don't even remember what I said when I snapped, but I remember the energy behind it.
Yeah. I don't remember you said either.
I remember that.
You said something like, no, the people can't see. It was about the pole. It was about that. It's not right. Or like they can't see or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could feel your exasperation.
And it's interesting because that's not the bit that I remember feeling frustrated about at all. I don't remember snapping about the pole or people not being able to see. This is just how my brain has remembered it because it was cloudy for me as well. Was that it was I remember like you coming in and helping. My memory of it, we weren't communicating, so we were doing two different things. And then I thought you said something that I don't even remember what it was. And then I said, well, yeah, that's why I asked you to help. That for me is the bit I remember saying that. It's not clear. I can't say exactly what it was. This is one of the reasons to me why anger is so scary. It's so, and you're talking about it a bit with being unclear when you're mentioning the hurt. If I was sad about something, my recollection, I think, would be much more clear. I can be sad. Yes, my thoughts are going to be affected by sadness, but they're still going to be a bit clearer.
I appreciate that because I feel like it's the energy that makes things fuzzy. We're not in executive functioning necessarily. Like to remember and to be like, oh, you said this and that's why I said this. It's more like, oh, it's such like very reactive. So you lose touch with something that feels scary to lose touch with. And then maybe it's even more difficult in the memory of it because we can't talk about it even. I don't remember. My memory, I'm not saying I don't remember the way this went. I don't remember you saying any of that. I don't remember you ever saying something about me helping you. Like, I don't remember that ever being even part of it. I thought it was more about you're doing it wrong. Like help was like, because I was like, I am helping. Like I'm doing the things that I do and you're doing the things that you do. Helping wasn't even a construct until this minute. Like I don't, so I obviously heard what I am insecure about. Yeah. And you know what I mean?
The idea of you not putting the chairs in the right place like that. That's the only thing I remember about that is that we're not communicating. That was the bit I remember being frustrated about what was happening with the chairs. It was, yeah. Rather than, oh, she's doing it wrong. That wasn't a thought at the time.
Let's see. And this is where I remember I did the left side of the room and you did the right. I don't remember not helping. But then this is where it's, and then
yeah, exactly. Well, I remember it like
I was helping. I was helping the whole time. This is not helping the way you wanted me to. But yeah, it's tricky. And it's not happening right now, but like I'm shaking a little. Like my hands have been shaking. So this is the place where I also feel like, and there's a comment in the chat, how easy it is to cover all these hurts and anger with food. Yeah. Like if we're talking about this intentionally and with awareness. And also I personally am like thinking about this from a somatic point of view where I'm like, what's happening in my body that I need to tend to, because I've got a lot of, there's this, even though if it's not here, but it's here. And like, if I could take real like time to myself, I would pace around, because I have a lot of energy moving through. Like I could stand up, and if I did, I would be like doing this. Like I can feel that, and I need to, and that's part of how I need to move that energy through. In the absence of understanding that, I'm putting myself in a position of like this kind of feeling. Let me get the chips. You know what I mean? Because like it's crunching, like it's doing that same thing of like translating the that's happening, literally coming out my hands. Like they're shaking, and putting it into a channel that also works. And that would just happen because I wouldn't be aware necessarily. This is why I love like awareness of stuff, because I wouldn't understand what was going on. And I would just be like feeling something that I didn't know what to do with that. And food would fix it, and it would push it down, and it would literally soothe the energy in my system, because I have something to do and to crunch and sensory tools help with that. So that's why I like to talk about the felt sense of this as well, noticing the way your body reacts to emotions, because you and I can sit here and have a conversation and make it nice and feel like, oh, that was a good communication, and that's all here. It's not dealing with what's clearly happening in my body, which is like there's stuff, there's residual stuff. So sometimes I think we're like, no, I'm okay with it, or no, I understand why that happened. I'm not mad at her, and that all could be true, but that's cognitive. And that there's also a body element to experiencing any emotion.
Yeah. Looking in the comment where someone's commented that you're demonstrating the whole rupture and repair thing, hopefully making your relationship stronger in the process. It's impressive you're both able to be so vulnerable with each other. Oh, thanks, Karen.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, please do.
Just for the benefit of anyone listening, anyone who might be, because it's a podcast. Rupture repair is my favorite. And I think this is really hard to do. To be honest, I think this is a really uncomfortable conversation. I feel a little bit on the other side of it, like getting to the other side of it. I feel a little better now, but that was very hard for me to have that conversation. And I have done these rupture and repairs enough to know like it will be better. I am so glad we had this conversation. I do feel like it strengthens a relationship, but it doesn't feel like it in the moment. You know what I mean? Like moving towards conflict and confrontation feels like the opposite of safe. And all that time that I was just talking, I felt the opposite of safe. But I'm now sort of like the repair is good.
Yeah. When I came back from India and I went with Becca, who used to help out on this podcast, and Becca and I didn't know each other that well when we went, and we spent a month together, sharing a room together every minute of the day. And there were certain things that had bothered me about that time. And something came up afterwards. And I actually said something, and I said, well, actually, and I, said to her some of the things that had bothered me when I was there. And she took it and she understood. And then she told me some of the things that had bothered her about me. And I remember like initially, like in the moment receiving it, it's like, oh, ow, because in my mind, I've got this whole story where, I'm the perfect party. I don't do anything wrong. Like I'm a delight to spend every minute of the day with for a month. And then she's saying these things and I'm like, oh, like I can see the truth and like definitely see her perspective in what she's saying. And we were able to exactly do this, to kind of go through this rupture and repair. And both of us afterwards had such a sense of feeling like our relationship deepened because of that level of trust, of going like, okay, if something happens again, I can trust that the two of us are going to be invested enough to try to understand and acknowledge each other's part and make some sense, or whatever it takes. Obviously, it depends on the situation. But yeah, it's hard. It's so much easier to just move on. Because like you, I thought a couple of times that day, especially at the end of the day when we came home, about addressing it. Because I think I felt a bit of distance when we came home. And I remember thinking like, maybe I've got to say something. Maybe I've got to say something. And I remember in my mind just going like, just close the gap, just move towards. And if we end up talking about it, then we do. Because you know what it's like when you feel like that distance grow, sometimes it's hard to close that gap. The distance is there and you want to kind of keep your distance. And my kind of sense wasn't like really conscious what I did. It was more of a felt sense of moving in. And I felt you moving in to join me. And my memory was that we had, a nice evening together that evening.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about it anymore after that. I think at that point, I just chalked it up to pre-event nerves. Like
Do you know
that's how
why?
I had experienced it. What?
I tell you why you weren't thinking of it, because you did a cold water dip in the
Oh
sea.
yeah, that's right.
Cold water just fixes everything with
Right,
the
I did.
nervous system.
Yeah. I mean, I did like move. Yeah, that was it was a somatic workshop. It was a nervous system regulating workshop. So yeah, maybe I did it. Yeah, it was gone from my mind at that point. It was. I remember. I also felt like yes, I guess I had more clarity on it as well. Just to feel like we were both in a heightened state prior to that event. Like we were both stressed. To me, that's what it felt like as well. But I guess not everyone's going to have an opportunity. I certainly don't in my life where if I move towards a repair with somebody, or let's say you're in a situation where there isn't one, like at a workplace, where it's just like a systemic, like anger towards the system kind of thing, not necessarily just interpersonal anger, where you're not going to get the repair. And that, what do you do with that then? Because not everyone's going to hear, like your example with Becca. It's like, well, that takes two mature people to be able to say these things to one another, and for both people to hear them and process them and take them. Like I know people who I would expect if I shared something that there would be a lot of defensiveness and anger and resistance back, which, and I've certainly been that person too. That then can be, I don't want to go there because I don't trust that their repair will happen. Like I don't see this ending well, better to swallow it.
Yeah, and part of me is going, I'm not sure this is true in every situation, but my mind is going, well, unless both parties are also interested in their own responses, then how can you?
Yeah.
If I'm only interested in telling you what I think your thing is, and I'm not interested in like what was going on for me, what is mine here? Most of it, 99% of it is mine. Just needed a trigger, a perfect storm of situations to kind of ignite that. So yeah, when you talk about what to do with it, that's where I hit a wall. That's where my tendency then, the anger goes and I want to collapse into despair.
Yeah.
Because exactly that. I'm like, what do I do about the system? What do I do about this person who isn't remotely interested in reflecting on their own part of this?
Yes, this is the cue of helplessness, and helplessness is the ultimate dysregulator where, that it will cause the collapse. And I'm aware in the chat, it says it can go in the opposite direction for me and I will refuse to eat. And I have felt that where that helplessness exists because it's like, well, I'm going to control this. I'm not going to have this need. I'm not going to have this problem. I'm going to push it so far down that watch, I don't even need to work it through. It's like, you move away from the the emotion. You know what I mean? I do believe that binging and restricting are the same. It's the same well it all comes from. It's just like the way that the system chooses to deal with it. And I think that with helplessness, I think for me personally, that has inspired a restriction response the most because it's been like, then I need to control what I can. And you sort of can move towards that side of things actually because there's a helplessness. I think binging can also be a product of helplessness for sure. But I'm just trying to like, I think for people who restrict, it's a coming from that same feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to look at that as somebody who didn't have that psychological pattern of going, oh, I feel helpless. So therefore I have to control food. My brain would go, oh, I feel helpless. So therefore I'm never going to be able to control anything anyway. So like what is even the point? It was this very catastrophic thinking that I then would judge myself even more for because I would see other people struggling with food. Well, at least they managed to, because when you're out of control looks really appealing. At least they managed to use this as a catalyst for control. That's how I felt at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that maybe just speaks to, do we go towards sympathetic activation, or like, do you go towards a freeze, or do you go towards a mobilization, which is just, and plus a lot of times like you restrict in the moment to get the control in the moment, but it has the backlash anyway,
Yeah.
because then biology comes in and then you're just doing both. You're just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I rationally know that. But then I'm like, well, at least it's biology. My mind would always be able to find another thing like, well,
yeah.
yeah, you can't beat biology, but
It's interesting. It's like, then it leads you to this place of, is it the anger or the helplessness, or it's both, but like thinking about what's so difficult about tolerating anger is also potentially tolerating helplessness and despair. Because if that anger doesn't have a productive outlet, that becomes the result to potentially. And maybe those of us or anybody who has experience with anger leading to helplessness may have learned to just not go there in the first place. Like anger doesn't lead anywhere good. So I don't want to experience anger because it's essentially a conduit to having to experience helplessness, you know?
Yes. I really resonate with that.
So how do we tolerate? We should do a different episode. Like, how
do
do
a
we
whole anger
tolerate?
series.
Yeah, because I think we all experience helplessness sometimes. I don't think that's avoidable. I experienced it this week several times, and it's really a really sticky one.
How did you handle it? Or what was
angry.
the reaction? See, and I would have collapsed into despair and probably have at various times over the last couple of weeks.
I have done that. I'm just the way I run these days, this decade, I go into anger. But that then makes me create conflicts in my relationships because I will go to I will take it out on Mike. I mean, he could vouch for that right now. You know, whenever I feel helpless, I start to like kind of be like nitpicky with him and project. You're not doing the dishes right. You're not da 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 da. You know, and we have I'm like, I know I'm doing it. You know, like I'm feeling this way about X, Y, and Z. It's coming out at you. I'm sorry, you know. But you know, yeah. I guess that's how I handle it. It's not really handling it.
So in the here and now, with your thinking mind,
yeah.
If you're in a situation where you feel helpless, how would you like to respond?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually been like I have a new answer to that because this has been occurring to me and I've been using it. I don't even know if this is exactly like in line, but it's where I've been going. I remind myself of what's most important to me. So the places where I feel helpless are the places where I don't have control over certain things like my kids or not them, but like the things that happen to them or my business. Like Instagram is a place where I feel helpless. I know it sounds trite, but it really impacts me a lot in that like I feel like I can't even, it's a whole other thing. But like it's like there's such a helplessness in that. And I'm like, what matters to me? And more as I don't know if it's aging or what, but I'm like, I want to be in my life. What matters to me is to be in my life, to be in the places that no one can ever take away. So like I've been going, oh, my knee's feeling better. So like I've been going for walks and it's summertime and it's, gosh, if I could just like show you what I'm looking at, like the green, I'm like, it's like trees everywhere. Like this, no one can take away from me my access to, well, I guess that's not true, but like outdoors or nature and my time with my kids when we're having fun and we're going on vacation. I kind of bring myself back to the places where there's access to joy or calm and ease and regulation in ways that's what I want my life to be more about. And so I just kind of go back to the here and now around like, okay, I am helpless. Okay, that's all like starts to become very cognitive and very projecty. Like, what if this? What if this? What if this? What if this? And it's like, stay here and now. What's here and now for me? And that here and now principle is like where I continue to keep going. What's here and now for me that gives me a sense of ease? And I'm going to move towards that. Even if because I think in the past it'd be like, yeah, but that doesn't fix the problem. That doesn't, still what if? And it's like, yeah, that doesn't matter. I need the right now. I just need the right now. And that's like, that's as far as I need to go. And that I've been more on board with that lately. What about you?
Well, that to me just sounded like a shift in perspective, but the idea of zooming in or zooming out. So if the thing that you're helpless about is massive and systemic and big, zooming in on those small things, on where you are, on being outside, on these little things that matter. Likewise, I don't know if the washing machine has stopped working and you feel helpless about that, then it's zooming out.
Yeah.
It's shifting, I guess, your perspective to create a sense of safety and ease. I think for me, it comes back to the serenity prayer. The addiction world, they often use it, but it's like, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The part that's more likely to go into to defeat can actually accept and let go. Doesn't always feel terrible about it. Sometimes it will just go like, okay, like I can accept this and I can let it go. But then sometimes I miss opportunities where I could actually do something different because
Yeah.
I'll sometimes go there too quickly. Maybe there's something for me as well about courage,
Yeah.
change the things that I can
Yes.
change, because there's real wisdom in the discernment of knowing whether we are helpless or not,
Mhm.
and to what extent in any situation.
So that reminds me a lot of like in anger or anxiety, the part of the system that has more energy. There's actually positive aspects of that, right? And there's the benefit of action and empowerment. Action and empowerment and having more control live in the part of the nervous system that also houses anger and that houses anxiety. It's just a matter of like there's a spectrum of intensity of that. But there's also benefit to going to where the collapse lives. So the part of the nervous system that houses collapse and despair is also the same part of the system that houses surrender, because there's a difference between a freeze and a restorative stillness, but they're the same part. So it's like where you tend to go has a there's something in there to be learned. There's something in there like that's there's like pros and cons. And in where I tend to go, there's pros and cons. And it's almost like, how do we know where we are to tap into the part of where our system is, or where our system can benefit from going, that can take the pros from both? So like I tend to get very, and even as you were talking, I was like, yeah, and I'd also like to write a letter to Instagram and blah, blah, you know, and like, I'm going to go to YouTube, you know, like, and it's like, that can be productive for me because I'll find a different way to do this. And I'll believe in that. And that's helpful. That's empowering for me to not feel helpless. But there's also a part of me that can get really like too much in there. And then that's not productive. And that's where the ask is to go to the part where you are and to say, and to accept the things I cannot change, and to find that the kind of surrender that doesn't feel like giving up, the kind that feels like ease, you know, that like, and that is where my system, that's where I need to work. Like that's my angle, is how do I go there and find more comfort there? Whereas you're saying your part of your work might be finding more comfort in activation, you know, and finding the parts of that can help you. But I think what we do is that we get scared about the parts of that part of the system that don't help us, that hurt us, right? So like I'm scared to get still because I'm scared to go to despair. And so I just stay away from it. But and vice versa. But like there's actually pieces of both that have positive, there's light and dark in everything.
It's funny, like you're scared to get still because you're scared. And I'm like, okay, I'm scared to activate because I'm scared. And you know what my mind is? It's like that I'll destroy the world. I don't think there's any latent anger in there though, Steph. Let's not read too much into it. But yeah. Of course, there's so much we could say about it, but I'm conscious of time. So I
How do
mean,
you feel right now?
how do I feel? I feel calm. Do you know what? There's a little bit of me that's judging me because I thought, you know, when Steph gave her side, I was then like, I got too much into the details, and I think that came from like an ego place. I think there was part of me that was conscious that, oh, people are listening, and I think Sarah's just a bitch for like having to go at Steph for just putting the chairs in a different place to where she wanted them. That's not what was going on for me. But I realized after I was saying this is not helpful. Like this is me like moving away from the process between you and I, and getting into, it wasn't like anger, it didn't feel really activated, but it felt like a, oh no, I don't want people getting the wrong idea. But it felt very, oh, it's a terrible thing, but very sort of self-oriented about how people will think about me. So
Yeah.
and then I was conscious that by doing that, that also made me look more defensive and making it more about me. So I judged myself for like trying to explain myself too much because, oh, I'm just trying to make myself the good guy. Like, Sarah, it's okay if you were the bad guy. It's all right.
I think that's relatable. You
Yeah.
know, would we be relatable if we didn't bring ego into it? You know what I mean? Like, because we all are human beings that have ego parts. You know what I mean? So I think even just naming that and saying that is probably more helpful than not, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you feeling?
My body is like much more, there's more gravity in it. So I feel like I'm not like all that, this isn't there. I feel a little bit in my arms, just a little bit, but not throughout the whole thing like I did. And my head feels slower. Like I feel like my words are, I'm not afraid to stop talking. And I feel like I can think straight enough to talk. I do feel like I have some energy though that I probably want to shake out. I also have like a part of the back of my mind, like, what are people going to think of this episode? Like there's that ego part of me too. That's like, how is this going to read? But that's okay. I'm also looking at the trees and I'm like, you got to see this. Like, this is I'm going to go for a walk later. And like remembering to counterbalance all that, this stuff with that stuff. I'm like actively doing that. This is a good spot to sit in for the podcast.
Yes. Lovely comment in the chat. You both just came across as genuine, authentically sharing what had triggered you, not judging bad or good. It just is. Thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for witnessing us
Yes.
and encouraging us.
Being there with us. It probably actually, it was probably kind of better having some community members with us as well.
I feel like otherwise we might have recorded and been like, let's not put that out. Let's just scrap that and do it.
Yeah.
Do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Steph.